So now to give us an overview of exactly what CCA is for those of us that are not sure, and to tell us what progress has been made here in the state of California, I'd like to introduce my friend Shawn Marshall from Local Energy Aggregation Network, LEAN. I will plug in your computer.
Thank you, Joe. Full disclaimer, first of all, thank you for putting this together. Thank you very much, and for hosting today. Full disclaimer, I am the Executive Director of LEAN. What we are is a nonprofit organization that supports CCA formation around the state of California and nationally. We have a very specific focus on integration of clean power and greenhouse gas reduction measures as part of those aggregations. Aggregations going on all around the country. Some communities are aggregating coal and nuclear, and we're saying, why bother with that? That's just the status quo. So we have a very definite clean energy bent to what we do. And I'm happy to say that in California, for the most part, interested communities really are leading with this combination of economics and environment being balanced. So that's the great news. I will also say that I came out of Marin Clean Energy. I was serving on the city council of Mill Valley, which is one of the towns in Marin, back in 2006 when the task force started, and I was sitting exactly where you are and joined the steering committee, and we were off to the races, and it took several years to get going with lots of heartache and strife. I'm very glad to report there's not nearly the amount of strife that we had. And I also want to just point out my good friend Michael Rock, who was the city manager of Fairfax at the time when we were running the ball in Marin. Fairfax stood up and took a great leadership role, helped get the ball across the goal line, and now Michael's here in Lomita, right? So call that guy. He's been there. He's still standing, and I'm happy to report, Michael, you'll hear more, but it's gotten a lot easier. It's gotten better. So that's what LEAN is and who I am. And so we will start now. Do you guys need this? Do I need to use this?
Yeah, because it's being filmed.
Oh, all right. There you go.
And yes, we are recording this, and so for any of your colleagues that aren't able to be here today, we will send out the link afterwards so that you can share the video of this, as well as both the presentations that Shawn and I are making.
Okay, it's never good when it says searching for content. Here we go. Ta-da-da! Okay. Okay. So we're gonna go back to the beginning so that all of you understand that we're not alone in this boat. CCA actually exists currently in 6 states around the country. The state of Massachusetts was first, followed by Ohio, and California came around in 2002 with the passage of AB 117. I'm very pleased to report there are several more states now that are looking at this model. The state of Utah, New York, Delaware. LEAN is supporting 3 of those, Utah, New York, and Delaware, with a real focus and a hope to get some clean power thresholds built into those pieces of legislation, but we'll see how that goes. Also, for context, there is growing interest around the state. So when we launched in 2010, nobody really knew what the heck was going on, and the good news is that Marin Clean Energy has succeeded beyond expectations. We've actually exceeded GHG reduction targets as well as new renewable power targets. And so a couple years after we launched, Sonoma Clean Power got started. They launched earlier this year. The City of Lancaster in LA County is getting ready to launch their program in January. No, they're going to launch in May. We'll talk more about that. And then, as you can see, Joe mentioned Alameda. There are a number of other counties that are in varying stages of investigation, including yours. I hope you don't mind. I put you all up there. Some just at the very beginning stages, others having already committed funds. This morning, I was at the California State Association of Counties meeting, and it was incredible, the reception that we got. And I was very excited about it because our goal this year is to get out to all 58 counties and at least introduce them to the concept. So here's a basic picture of how it works. How many of you are brand new to this topic? Can I have a show of hands? Nobody. Okay, only one. Great. So most of you have probably seen a version of this before. In short, what CCA does is to create a functional partnership between the municipality or groups of them who form a joint powers agency to partner with the existing utility, in your case, Southern Cal Edison, and the utility continues to provide all of the grid infrastructure, the customer billing, line maintenance, and all that stuff. So the CCA has nothing to do with infrastructure. We don't have anything to do with smart meters. That's all on the transmission and distribution side of the ledger. What the community takes over is the supply side, what it is you're putting on the grid on behalf of your community. And what we're learning is that the collective buying power of these communities that get together and really are very specific in their RFPs, right? I mean, we're the buyers. You get to say what you want. So in Marin, we said, as a policy matter, we don't want coal and we don't want nuclear. And so we issued an RFP that said, we need these other threshold mixes. Lo and behold, we got 13 bids back, and this was before it even really took off. Sonoma, I think, got 16 bids and did even better than we did. So we find that each one of these gets incrementally better as the market comes to the table. In the end, the power that is delivered to you is still the same as the power that's delivered to your neighbor. So one of the very basic things that's important to understand is that whether you're getting your electricity from a municipal utility, from a CCA, or from your IOU, all of these load-serving entities are putting power onto the grid being the superhighway that conducts electricity and delivers it into our homes. That power all gets mixed up together. So you don't get to say this electron is going to your house and this electron is going to mine. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because I think it's important to understand that the power mix is the power mix. The power of CCA, though, is that you're changing the ratio of brown power to green power, and slowly over time changing that, ratcheting it up, and really making a significant difference in what is coming through our vents at home. Sorry, investor-owned utility. PG&E, Southern Cal Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric. This is another way to explain what CCA is. We call it very often a hybrid approach or muni-light because it exists between full public power. You guys have some public power agencies down here, I know, several. Yeah, exactly, City of LA. We have several up north. So it exists between that model and the investor-owned utility, which really has a monopoly hold on all of us customers. And so by creating this new partnership, it allows some choice in the marketplace. Choice also, it turns out, drives costs down. So we're beginning to see the same type of results that the telecom industry saw back 30 years ago when all the monopoly telephone companies broke apart. It was hard for a few years, but the result now is we can call anywhere in the world for $20 a month. And by the way, it's all wireless and our phones are this big. So it really does also drive innovation. Why is it so powerful? So Joe mentioned a lot of these already, but the bottom line is that the CCA can be structured to meet the needs of your communities. So you guys get to drive the bus. You get to decide how you want to do this. What are your goals? What kind of minimum thresholds do you want to set? You could have 2 different products. You could have 3 products. You really get to write the script based on what you want. It offers consumer choice where none currently exists. We just talked about that. Importantly, CCA is revenue supported, not taxpayer subsidized. So what's happening here is that the generation rates that heretofore had gone to SCE will get redirected to support the new CCA agency. That agency then goes out and procures power or develops power on your behalf, pays the utility an exit fee, so they're not left holding the bag. Don't worry that the utilities are going to suffer, because they are kept whole through this process. But ultimately, it's a revenue-based model. So there's no cost into it for the local governments that participate. It is currently offering stable and cheaper electricity rates in this state. It allows for a rapid switch to clean power supply. We've already talked about that. You are in control of your RFP. You get to set the terms of what you want and let the market respond. We definitely see that it's leveraging private sector investment. So quick story here, Marin is just now working on a partnership with Tesla to come in and provide commercial battery storage to MCE customers. And it's a pilot, so because public agencies can't endorse a private sector company, but there's all kinds of these innovative pilots going on that create value and benefit for the customer base. And this is all happening through the CCA. Last but not least, it definitely creates opportunities for economic development. So another quick story, in Marin, with the local power development we have underway, and in Sonoma as well, those are local jobs. So when we did a solar project on our local airport. Those employed local union workers, not always union, but predominantly project labor agreements and all of that. We also have an agreement with our Community Development Corporation to provide jobs training for our residents in the areas of solar installations and energy efficiency retrofits. And that's a relationship that MCE has with the CDC. There's state funding that comes into that to support that effort. So you can begin to see the multiplier effect and how the CCA can benefit different segments of the population and also achieve your goals. Quickly, the policy framework. AB 117 is the state statute that authorizes CCA. Piece of legislation was amended in 2011 after Michael and I suffered the onslaught of PG&E and Marin. And what that did was it sets up a utility code of conduct. And what that means is that utilities are henceforth prohibited from marketing against CCA programs in the public domain. That has made a huge difference. What that means is that Sonoma Clean Power was able to launch. They have an 11% opt-out rate. Lancaster is likely to have far less. It just really takes all of the vitriol and fear-mongering out of the picture, and that makes a huge difference. CCA is responsive to AB 32 goals. Those of you who are elected officials in the room will understand that a lot of these hooks or nexus to policy matters also translate into avoided costs. So at first, when AB 32 passed, we thought that we would have some compliance costs. Turns out that we don't, but there are other avoided costs that, for example, the City of Mill Valley is benefiting from. We put a solar installation on our public safety building. At the time, we didn't have MCE, so we bonded for that. We spent a couple $1 million putting that solar install up. Now, we would not have to do that. MCE would do that as our partner. We would get the solar installation. MCE would sell the excess power back onto the grid to serve the rest of the CCA. So it becomes this beautiful closed-loop cycle that ultimately saves our general fund money. And that's very important to those of us who are looking over the public coffers. Currently, CCA is showing up in more and more climate action plans around the state, usually in the top 1 or 2 initiatives in the state. In a local climate action plan. So here's how it works. Let's just say South Bay Clean Power, whatever your group ultimately decides to launch with, you would form a JPA, or you may already have one here that could serve that function. The reason that you form a JPA is that it provides a legal firewall between the assets and liabilities of the cities and their general fund and the assets and liabilities of the public agency. So we went through a bunch of joint and several liability issues. There's law that stipulates these separations, and so in general, that is the recommended way to move forward, just to keep a separation of church and state. As many jurisdictions as you want can participate in that JPA. There is no statutory limit. The utility, as I said, continues to provide the key functions that exist on the transmission and distribution side of the ledger. Importantly, it is consolidated billing. So you're not going to get a separate bill from your CCA program. It all shows up on your master bill. And in a minute, I'll pull out my PG&E bills and pass them around. You can see what it looks like. CCA is an opt-out program. Full disclosure, there are some folks who really don't like that. And that's understandable. But there are reasons why every single state in the U.S. that has this program has structured it as an opt-out program. And so what that means is that the CCA becomes the default provider of the electricity generation, not altogether different from for example, water agency or garbage, other municipal services that become the default provider. A customer can opt out and go back to the generation services of the IOU at any time that it wants to. So there's no binding contract, not like the telecom where you had to sign up for 5 years and pay $100. There's none of that. And then, for those of you that are concerned about the regulatory side of the world, CCAs are not fully regulated like the IOU, but neither are they like a public utility, which really exists on its own. Again, it's a hybrid, so there are some aspects of the CCA that are regulated by the PUC, including RPS, resource adequacy, cost recovery surcharge, and all kinds of mumbo-jumbo that you'll learn about when you do this. It's important, and I think it's a good feature. Okay, will you help me with this? I'm going to pass around my bills. Thankfully, I've got them all paid up. Look, I got a ton of them here. One of them's my dad's bill. Here, you just pass those around. Okay, so all this is going to show you, because I highlighted, is the line item that gets replaced on your, in my case, PG&E bill. And so it essentially swaps out what PG&E would have charged for the generation. PG&E, you get a credit for that, and then you are charged by MCE. So those of you who are looking at various bills, I'm happy to answer specific questions at the end. You'll see that the credit back is greater from PG&E than what I actually paid. It's only about $3, but I'm signed up. I'm opted up to 100% deep green, and so I'm still in a net savings situation at my house. Here's the macroeconomics. We already talked about the fact that CCA is revenue-based. This morning, I used this slide. The statewide electricity consumption is 259 million megawatt hours. That's remained fairly flat. When you do some back-of-the-envelope math, what I did with that is I took that number, multiplied out by 75%, and that 25% accounts for public utilities as well as any opt-out. So I took that number and multiplied it out by 7.9 cents a kilowatt hour, which is currently the residential rate in Marin, because that's the only residential rate we have, and came up with well over $15 billion in net value to communities around the state. So it is, the economics of this thing are not de minimis. They're quite significant, and we'll show you some specifics for the South Bay in a minute. As Joe mentioned, the average startup is somewhere between 1.5 and 3.5 million. I want to suggest for you guys, just based on your good history, you already have studies from UCLA, you're getting one from USC. I'm going to suggest that you may not need to totally reinvent the wheel on your feasibility study. I think that you're going to have a lot of that done, and you're not going to need to spend crazy amounts of money on it. In fact, I really recommend you don't. What's the point? You're just going to rehash it. So we can talk about that later, but I would suggest that the amount of money that Alameda has set aside is nowhere near. You're not going to need that much in phase one. That's a good news. Really good news. You may need that in phase two, depending on how many cities sign on and the complexities they're in. But, you know, I think really you're going to come in right around $2 million for the programmatic startup, which is, you know, is repaid. Okay, I think we've talked about all. Oh, the only other thing to mention, people say, well, how do the economics work? Can you be cost competitive? Yes, you can. You need to have the right power mix, right? So you've got to have, you hire the best and the brightest. You hire people with utility and procurement experience. But don't forget that a JPA is a nonprofit agency. It's not a shareholder-driven corporation. There are no shareholder dividends. There are no million-dollar salaries. And you have public bonding authority. So if you ultimately decide to get interested in co-investing in local projects, which we hope you will, you can partner up with the private sector. They take the tax credit, then the public agency can buy the project, maybe it's a municipal project, after that tax credit has expired, and the numbers really do bear out. So you'll get to all of that as you go, but I think really having it as a nonprofit agency also really helps the economics. Okay, here's the money picture in the South Bay. All right, so I need to walk you through this because I want to be crystal clear about the assumptions that we made in here, because it's not a apples to apples all the time. So the first column is taken from Joe's slide. That's 2010 electricity usage data that you got for those cities. We then looked up for those cities what your 2014, your current GHG emissions are. Okay, that's the second column. The third column is the estimated annual revenue. So similar to what I did before, I took your kilowatt hours and multiplied them by 7.9 cents and came up with that estimated revenue. That's a residential rate. That's MCE's residential rate. Doesn't mean that that will be yours. You might actually come in less. I think Sonoma Clean Power ultimately will roll out with slightly below that for the residential customers. But I use that because that's what we have on the books today as a comparison. So when you do the math, that comes up to $2.31 billion per year gross. You take about 15% of that off the top to account for opt-outs and all of that and administration. And then you've got about 80% that you need for the cost of energy that goes right back out the door. So the delta that's left is what you have to leverage up to provide local programs and such. So let me go back and restate that. 2.3 per year, 80% of that goes back out the door to buy energy. Then you've got about 5% administration. So let's say you've got a delta of approximately 10% of that amount per year for reserves, for a rate shock. You can do a fund to pay for any kind of up and down in your rates, and or you can invest it back into the community. The fourth column is the new renewable energy potential through the California RPS. Renewable Portfolio Standard. It requires all load-serving entities, which includes CCAs, utilities, to meet a 33% renewable threshold by 2020. Both Marin and Sonoma are currently exceeding that threshold at the time of launch. So that's how quickly you can change this game. And then the last is your estimated GHG reduction, your potential savings when you do the math here. And the way I did this was I took SCE's average emissions factor, which is 7.28. I know all this is boring, but I need to explain it. PG&E is actually far less. PG&E has a very good solid mix right now. So it's 7.28, 728 pounds per megawatt hour times 16%. That's the percentage at which MCE is doing better than PG&E. Now, one could argue that if you guys had a similar power mix to MCE's, you would be doubling down on that with SoCal Edison, because PG&E's greenhouse gas emissions factor is 440. SCE right now is 728, and that's the average. So if you extrapolate that, this is conservative, you're going to do much better than this. But still, that's 154 tons of carbon savings, 154,000 tons per year. And that's just for these 7 cities. Really quick, this is from the City of San Anselmo. When they had third-party analysis of their climate action plan, they looked at all the different strategies that they had identified locally. And that orange line right there is joining MCE. That's the greenhouse gas savings that they would have just by joining MCE at the default level. Michael, I'm sure you've seen this slide 15,000 times. I'd like a new one from new cities, but that just shows you the leverage and the power that just joining this program at no cost to you has in terms of shifting your source of power.
Real quick, the county has their own community climate action plan that they need to meet as well, in addition to our city climate action plan.
Correct. Now is the time. Okay, so we say, don't wait on this. And there are a couple reasons why we say don't wait. One is that right now, natural gas pricing is at a historic low. So we're not saying that you should go out and procure 95% natural gas, but we are pragmatic. And natural gas is a balancing factor, certainly cleaner than coal, and it's cheap. So you will put together a power portfolio that likely will include some natural gas, and it will help you be competitive out the gate. Solar tax credit that I referenced earlier is shrinking or disappearing at the end of 2016. It may be renewed. We hope it will. We will fight for that. But in the event that it's not, it probably will drive solar prices up somewhat. So we're saying get in now, get your solar secured. It's pretty reasonably priced right now. The utilities are all fully resourced through 2018 and 2020. That means that you're not competing with the utilities on renewable sources like solar. So there is excess power out there and available, and when there's excess, the price goes down. Capacity charges are currently low, and there is affordable financing available. The banks, all of a sudden, the banks have decided that this is fabulous and it's incredibly bankable. So God bless River City Bank up in Sacramento that took the first plunge with us, because, by the way, the Bank of Marin wouldn't. They were too, remember that? They bailed on us. But at any rate, now the banks are coming around saying, hey, they're knocking down your door. So don't worry about the longer-term financial prospect. I'm not going to go through all of this, but other than to say CCA can serve as an umbrella organization, an integrative organization for many other energy programs. So if you guys are into property assessed clean energy, PACE programs, commercial still available. We hope residential will come back. In Marin, we're big into EV charging stations. We've just launched our first community-based solar project. So all of these things can feed through the energy agency, of which CCA becomes sort of that revenue base, and it just becomes a hub or a center for all kinds of different energy solutions for your community. So we think this is important because it's not an either or, it really is a both and opportunity. It would be irresponsible for me to come here today and say there are no risks. There are definitely risks when you take on a new enterprise. Cities know this all the time when they do various things. The risks are generally mitigable, and we've learned along the way. They fall into four categories. The first is rates. You must have competitive rates in order to keep your customers. It's now a competitive environment. Customer opt-out. It's important to make sure that you don't have excessive opt-outs, which is tied to rates, so that your business model remains viable. We've seen in Marin, it's a 23% opt-out rate that has held steady. In Lancaster, we expect the opt-out will go way, way further down, probably down into single digits. Political risk. What we say about this is don't rest on your laurels. So in San Francisco, this issue has been going on for the better part of 10 years through 3 different mayors and, yada, yada. And the political risk here is that you get a good momentum going. You're just about to sign off on everything. Then you wait and there's, an election and things change. And, so there's no question that the political side of this is the good news and the bad news, because the city councils are the gateway. And so we urge you to get it done when the time is right and not allow your council to change over in the middle of it. And then there's regulatory and legislative risk. That exists with pretty much everything we do in this state. And so now we have a CCA alliance, some of what was the Californians for Energy Choice. We've gone from having about 5 allies to now well over 275 allies at this last effort, AB 2145, which we won outright, thanks to people like Joe and others. So we're doing well on that. How are you guys doing? I'm going to run through some case study information here, and then we'll stop for Q&A. Here's the status in Marin. So right now, Marin County and the City of Richmond has joined together, and they're serving 125,000 customers, 23% opt-out. Each city that is a member has, and the county, has a member on their board of directors. The Napa County, unincorporated Napa, just voted to join, so their supervisor joined the board. The city of Benicia has voted to join, as has the city of San Pablo. Marin right now is in a moratorium because they've grown. It's just a lot to take on to bring new customers. So they've said, hold it, we're not going to take on any new members until the end of 2015 to catch up with themselves. To date, 131 metric tons of GHGs reduced. And this year alone, they will be saving MCE customers almost $6 million in rate savings. Here's their 4 energy choices. Joe showed Sonoma Clean Powers is similar. They just call it different things. So in Marin, the baseline product is a light green product that's 50% renewable. We started at 27%. Over the last 3 years, we've now gone up to 50% as a default. Then there's a voluntary opt-up to 100% deep green. That's 100% renewable. It is supported by renewable energy credits. It's a whole other discussion, but full disclosure, it is. And then they've got a new 4th option, which is the community solar project I referenced. For people like me who live under trees, if I want to invest in that project, it's a net metering issue. So I pay more. It is substantially more, but the power that is generated off that solar plant is net metered and credited to my account. This just is a review. Some people are very interested in, where does the power come from? Where does the power come from? And there is, I think, an accurate but ambitious refrain that says all your power should be generated locally. And I think that is a great vision and not terribly practical today. So we're getting there incrementally. So what Marin has done is that they've really focused on in-state power, opportunistic, picking up power contracts that are inexpensive, with now more than 17 energy suppliers. And they have a new 20 megawatt solar project. And just yesterday, they released a bunch of new data, and I'm sorry to say I don't have that with me, but they've got another 4 or 5 feed-in tariff projects happening in the county right now. So that's all within 4 years. So you can see that it's an incremental switch over to more and more and more local resources. But this idea of getting started with 100% local is making it happen, which is okay. These are the residential cost comparisons. This is the residential 2014. Light green is coming in about $1 lower. That includes the exit fees that I talked about. And then it goes up from there. Commercial is about $10 less for the 50% renewable product and goes up from there. Sonoma just launched in May of 2014. They started with their commercial customers only. They have not yet gone out to the municipal accounts or residential. That's happening in another 6 weeks. And they're going from 20,000 accounts to 200,000 accounts. So they're busy right now. We already talked about their opt-out rate. They started with, I think it was 7 of their cities, maybe 6. And now in the last 6 months, they've had a number of other communities join on. So that's illustrative and instructive because it means that you guys don't have to start with all 16 or whatever your desired capacity is. In fact, the suppliers basically say the minimum threshold is 25 megawatts. In order to be economically viable, now it's not perfect because you don't have the same allocation of fixed costs. So the bigger the better because you can spread those costs. But you can get started with a relatively small number just to get going. And they're already going gangbusters, 30 megawatts of new solar in county. And their 100% product is sourced by geothermals in the county. So their 100% product is more expensive than Marin's, but it is not supported by RECs. So that's a policy decision that each CCA will make as they move forward, and that's the beauty of the optionality of this program. Here's the City of Lancaster. They're going to launch with their municipal accounts first, just to work out their focus and get it all going for the municipal accounts, then to small commercial, then to residential. So It's important to know that the statute requires that the CCA serve all customers. You can't cherry pick. You can't say, "Oh, we only want the most lucrative customers." It has to serve all customers, and the CCA also continues to provide care rates and other low-income rates that exist through the utility. Those transfer over. Those are the same, so you don't lose any of those benefits through the CCA. In Lancaster, they approached their program as an enterprise fund. So I don't necessarily recommend this for everybody, but again, an option. What they're saying is, because it's an enterprise fund, they have the option, if they so choose, to use some of the revenues from the CCA to serve their general fund needs. Now, we maintain a firewall between the JPA and the local governments, but if there is a need to backfill some general fund stuff for energy-related projects, if you set it up as an enterprise fund, you have that option going forward. Okay. Also important to know, they're not leading with greenhouse gas and renewables. They're leading with economics and the opportunity to really generate cost savings for their customers. So they're not going to come out with some fancy, 50% minimum, but they are going to exceed the state RPS, and that's a stated goal. Okay, last promise. 3 legs of the stool to get started. We talk about this in 3 buckets. The first of which is political and community, and that's exactly what you guys are working on now. Going out, getting the resolutions of support, get the data pulled to get your technical study done. In your case, I think it's going to be lean, mean, because you've got a lot of it already. Community education is critically important. Ultimately, you will need to have a JPA ordinance that is passed by the city councils of all of your participating communities. And you must have a robust marketing and community outreach program. There is nothing worse than launching something and pissing everybody off, pardon the French. So the City of Lancaster has really committed a ton of money to their public outreach because they don't want it to be a surprise to their community. And we did as well, but we didn't have nearly the amount of money that PG&E did. So we recommend a robust marketing budget. There's a fair amount of technical work. Now we're learning as we go. There are a number of technical consultants up and down the state who are really very good at this. And so you won't be alone. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we can help point you in the right direction in terms of qualified vendors to do this work. And then there's financial considerations. So the first thing you're going to need is a sponsor to basically pay that couple $1 million in programmatic startup. We would love to have the county step forward. If there's a large city in your collection that is willing to front that money and be repaid, that would be great. Sonoma County Water Agency did it up there, and they charged a 4% interest rate. So they didn't do it altruistically. Marin did it altruistically, but the water agency said, "No way, man." And they have already, it's already been, refinanced, and so they've been taken out. But they did get a slight bump for doing that. And then you have CCA cost of first energy for that first contract. That's where the banks come in, and more the banks are getting interested in providing that early working capital to pay for the first contract. There's some bridge financing that has to happen because your revenue doesn't start coming in until after you have to buy the power. So there's a lag of anywhere between 3 months and 6 months, depending on when you sign your contract. So there's a bridge loan that happens in there. Fairfax helped out with that in Marin. Okay, we think CCA is the path forward. We are happy that you guys are here, and we're also happy to help. Lean is now working with Alameda County, San Mateo County, and the City of San Diego on the nuts and bolts process. So we'd love to do that for you too when you move on. Thanks.